Our next guest holds a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing and a master's in literature and has taught at various universities. The bio on her latest novel says she's a writer, an editor, and a farmer who lives at the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains with her husband, 4 dogs, 4 cats, 6 goats, and 23 chickens. Quite a life. That new novel, Charlotte and the 12, is the second in her Steel Secrets series. Virginia-based novelist Andy Cumbo Floyd is here with us today. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you, dragging you away from all those things up in the mountains.
It's nice for a break.
It is. Talk about Mary Steele. She's the center of your 2 books.
Sure. So Mary is a 16-year-old girl. She grew up in a town called Terra Linda, which is loosely based on Buena Vista, Virginia, not Buena Vista, as my father-in-law is sure to point out. And she has this strange ability to see ghosts. But they're not scary, spooky ghosts. They're the ghosts of people who have died in horrible ways. And in some sense, they're hoping for her help. And so she, in the midst of these 2 books, is doing some work to recover some history, to find out about herself, and to tell the stories of these people whose ghosts she can see.
Now, these are historical fiction, so I have a problem with those sometimes because I have to do a lot of studying to see what's real and what's not.
Right.
The first book was called The Slaves Have Names. Where did that idea for that book come from?
So I grew up on a slave plantation in Fluvanna County, so a little bit west of Richmond, and I grew up not knowing anything about the people who had been enslaved there and who built these places that I called home. And so I decided to work on trying to find out about them. So that book is a creative nonfiction. It includes 22 profiles of people who were slaves on this plantation and my imaginings of what their lives were like. Because they were enslaved, we don't know a great deal about them. And so in many ways, I was sort of trying to picture what it would be like, say, to be a spinner, to spin the clothing for people on the farm. And so that book comes out of my own life experience and then historical research. So there, hopefully in that one, I give you some signals to tell you what's fact and what's my imagination, so you don't have to do the research yourself.
Right, but for this one, the new book moves us into ghosts of the 1950s.
That's right.
From the Rosenwald School, and that in and of itself is a historical lesson.
That's
for
right.
A lot of people.
So in Virginia, there were over 382 Rosenwald schools. Rosenwald schools were schools for rural African American children. They were funded by Julius Rosenwald, who founded the Sears and Roebuck Company. Also funded by the African American community surrounding the school, and then usually some local county funding. And they were usually 1 or 2 room schools. They were all designed from very specific plans, and they were the only educational source for most African American rural children all the way up until the 1950s, when school integration began, and then those children could go to integrated schools.
And Booker T. Washington was tied into the Rosenwald schools as well.
Exactly.
For Charlotte and the 12, it centers around a dozen students and their teacher who were killed in the 1950s, and their ghosts come to Mary.
That's right. So these people died of violent death. I won't give it away, so you can read the book and know. But Mary sees them in their school. She ends up appearing there one morning, she doesn't know why, and she sees the ghosts of these children, which I find to be a beautiful and horrible image that I came up with, and then their teacher. And their teacher's name's Charlotte Gilmore, and they are not sure why she can see them, no one else can. And Mary ends up getting to know them, she gets to know the children's parents, and through the course of the story, she solves their murder and tries to be part of a community effort to bring some healing around that horrible incident.
There are some very strong themes in the book. We're talking about racism, both past and present. It's a young adult book, but it's probably a good idea for parents to read as well so that they can foster the discussion.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's nothing intense, violent on the page. I was very careful to not do that, but there is discussion of very hard things. And I would say, yeah, it's a very wise choice for parents to either read the book before or with their children so that they can have some conversations. There's so much silence around this stuff that having that conversation at home kind of opens, I think, people up to them being able to talk about it with teachers or with their friends in a way that's safe and in a way that's informed. That's my hope, anyway.
And these stories kind of come out of where you started, like you said, on the slave plantation there. Why did that touch you to want to put them down in kind of fiction?
Yeah, I've struggled a lot with how to tell stories that are based in history. So none of the events of these stories happened, but they are inspired by things that did happen. And so I had seen that, but I had done a lot of work in The Slaves Have Names to try to keep it true and factual, and I felt like the freedom to just explore in fiction was going to give me more tools to write more deeply about what had happened during these time periods. And this time period, the 1950s, is important to me. I worked at the Martin Luther King Papers Project at Stanford University for a while, and as a white woman, I had never really heard that history of civil rights, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe that we had actually turned hoses on people. I mean, that, even as an adult woman, was so strange to me as history. It had always been story. So I wanted to help kids begin to understand that history sooner, so that so we could do the healing work I think we still need to do as a country around these things.
So 2 books. Is Mary Steele going to continue in another?
I think that there's going to be one more in that series, and it'll be set again out in Terra Linda, and I'm thinking I'm going to set it in one of the James and Kanawha locks. And I think it's going to have to do with lynching, so not another happy subject, but hopefully something that will bring us some healing as a people.
And it is eye-opening. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Andy Cumbo-Floyd. The new book is called Charlotte and the 12. It's a Steele Secrets story. We're going to put the link to more information about Andy and her books at WTVR.com/VTM so you can continue the conversation yourself.